I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. I'm here today with Renee Merrifield, MLA for our city here, Kelowna-Mission, right?
Kelowna-Mission.
Kelowna-Mission.
Absolutely.
And today we're going to talk about the AirBnB legislation that went into play around May, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
May, April?
May.
And you're saying that in the last piece you put out there that it's actually hurting tourism, and maybe that legislation just went too far.
Well, in the House, when we were in debate, BC United's MLAs were very vocal about how this was going to impact our cities. And for those of us in cities that rely on tourism, we knew it was going to have a very significant impact. And we knew that we didn't have enough hotel beds. We knew that there was a large part of the population that wanted Airbnbs, that they offer a different type of tourism experience. And so we went on record during that time. You can look up my speeches, you can look up my colleagues' speeches to really see that we said it's going to be a detriment to the community. I think what's most surprising to me was that I didn't expect that it would happen this quickly.
We came across a post there that said that the BC Hotel Association was taking credit for this legislation too. So was that lobby group responsible for some of this legislation, like a corporate interest in there? Like, because it's a lot of private, small type, people have one or two Airbnbs or maybe one just so they can afford the mortgage. I know of a few people that just, the only reason they could buy their place is because they're Airbnb-ing it out in the summer and living it in the winter.
Yes, and it was the Hotel Association. They actually commissioned a report by a subsidiary of McGill's business school to do the report. The report is very flawed. We drew a lot of attention to how the report was flawed and what we would want to see in order to get a more fulsome picture. And the biggest part of it was that it was completely driven by the Hotel Association believing that people wanted to stay in hotels or could stay in hotels rather than the Airbnbs and the niche that they fulfilled.
Wouldn't that be looked upon as a conflict of interest? Because that's obviously a vested interest for them to be putting forth a report that betters their financial outcomes if they can get rid of Airbnbs.
Yes, you would think so.
Yeah,
and I mean, it definitely within the report, if you read it, they do note that they were that the report is paid for by the Hotel Association. But in saying so, I was surprised that the public didn't give that more
scrutiny.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Because it's kind of like we've seen at the Taylor Swift concert, like hotel rates, in the thousands of dollars and the multiple thousands of dollars for a hotel room. Whereas, some people would rather stay in an Airbnb. And I know that a lot of people would rather stay in Airbnb, myself included, when I go even on vacation. And we go to Mexico, we stay in an Airbnb as opposed to a resort because we don't drink and stuff like that. So then if you stay in an Airbnb, you're not really, like the pools aren't as crowded and all that other kind of stuff. Because if you're in a resort, you're just basically drinking and eating kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think that you could apply that even to my situation with my family. I have 3 kids. Mm-hmm. And when you include my stepkids now, it's 5 kids. And when I used to travel, when my kids were young and it was just the 3 of them, oftentimes we would be forced to rent 2 hotel rooms. Right. Well, now my, then husband and I would be in 2 different hotel rooms, and our kids split between the 2 of us, and the baby goes to bed earlier than the other 2, and so now we're literally separated. And as anyone with a family knows, you don't want to eat out every meal. You want to have your little space with your kitchenette or some sort of cooking facility.
Right? Like a lot of people
100%.
Just for health reasons, and that's why I choose it, is because I can cook my own breakfast because that's an easy meal to cook, and then you can have a healthier breakfast, healthier start to the day. I get a kitchen, and you end up with probably anywhere from 800 to 1,200 square feet in an Airbnb or more, whereas in a hotel you're typically paying top dollar for 200 or 300 square feet, right?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest comparisons I could make is, we said, well, there's only probably 1,000, 1,400 total in Kelowna that are going to get shut down, but one of those might be at Discovery Bay with 3 bedrooms at $300 a night, whereas to buy those 3 bedrooms at the Delta is going to cost $1,200 to $1,400 to even more than that. I mean, I have family members that were trying to house family, and they were saying for 1 week at the Delta, it was going to cost them $10,000. I mean, that's that's outrageous when, that isn't including food, that isn't including, so it suddenly takes something that could be very affordable or a way that we've manufactured affordability and now turned it into something that is no longer feasible for the average family.
I did ask this question of Brenda Bailey, the jobs minister, the other day, and she brought up the example of the person that ran into her in the street there and started yelling at her, saying they had 20 plus condos that now they can't Airbnb and all that stuff. So she made it look like to a lot of people that this is this very rich people that have this corporate business that they're running Airbnbs. But for every one of those, there's probably tens of hundreds of people that have one Airbnb, and I know one particular one that the only reason they could buy the house, a young man buy a house or condo, is that he could Airbnb it in the summer to make the money to pay for it. Now he has very strict regulations of when he can Airbnb. I think it's only 90 days that he can do it, as opposed to like the summer months and stuff like that. So it seems like they use one example to punish everything without looking at like a bunch of the other cases. Like they don't want to talk about that case.
Yes, and you're exactly right. It was I think it's 1% of Airbnbs were actually multiples. Right. The rest of it was actually not. And what I was seeing were municipalities such as Kelowna even putting in sort of some guides, some zoning, some metrics, the licensing, and they were really doing a good job of saying this is where we want these Airbnbs. This is we're going to tell everyone who buys in this building that Airbnbs are allowed, rather than having it be surprise or having them be,
right.
kind of anywhere. And what, municipalities were asking for was help from the provincial government on enforcement. Yep. What they got was a one-size-fits-all hammer from the provincial government that shut down Airbnbs completely. And the big winners were the corporations. Yeah. The big winners were the hoteliers that now were laughing. I mean, we saw hotel rates go up immediately after the Airbnb legislation went in.
And it's not fair to the person that has one home and say they, like a development like Aqua or Brooklyn or something comes along and they say this is a designated Airbnb building. This was zoned properly, so they bought that property full well knowing that they could invest in that and there was a return on investment and stuff like that. Because a lot of those, won't cash flow as rentals because they cost, the cost per square foot, it just doesn't support like a rental. You'd have to charge, $8,000 a month rent.
Agreed.
In a vacation town.
Well, and that's case in point, right? Rentals are very difficult to work. In fact, the only rental high-rise that we have here in Kelowna was just approved, I believe it was yesterday or Tuesday, which is done by BC Housing. It's subsidized by BC Housing, by taxpayer dollars. Simply put, rentals don't work when they're in a concrete format unless you charge an exorbitant amount. I was just in Vancouver, and I was talking with my taxi driver, and he was saying like we're going to move out of Vancouver because we just can't afford it. And I said, well, where do you live? And he said, in a 3-bedroom condo. But he said our 3-bedroom condo, and get this, is $6,000 a month. Okay. But his wife was pregnant. He said, I work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm exhausted. Right. And he said, we just can't make ends meet anymore here in Vancouver. That's because it's a condo, it's a high rise. Yeah. And that's what keeps, moving and escalating those rental rates through the roof.
So I guess the question is, the election's coming up. And if the BC United to form government, I'm assuming you guys would repeal that legislation or change it to a way that's more palatable for people.
Yeah, and I think that we'd have to, I won't speak because I'm not I'm not a policy wonk, as it were, but it would be changed. Yeah. We voted against it. We did not see the reasoned approach that we felt it needed and required. We felt like it was going to harm both our communities. It was going to harm individuals who had purchased based on the regulations and what they were, and also it was going to harm the economic growth of our communities. And so we really see this as and harm those who want to travel within our communities and really experience the best that BC has to offer. So we would be looking at a very different Airbnb legislation that would be allowing much of that to go forward.
The facts are tourism is down in the Okanagan.
Oh, massively.
Tourism is down.
Massively.
People can kind of like, come up with their different reasonings. They can say it's the wildfires, which we really haven't had any in the Okanagan touch wood, we'll find some wood so far. But a lot of people do like staying in Airbnbs. It is kind of a thing they do. So they will just go elsewhere. They will just go somewhere else. It's not helping with no Airbnbs or less Airbnbs in the Okanagan. And obviously, the wildfire issues, which is another thing you and I could probably talk for a long time about, how we could do better in wildfire protection and mitigation here in the Okanagan Valley as well. The real truth is, though, is tourism is down, and so many people rely on it here.
100%. Tourism is down. You mentioned, those two aspects. I would talk about the third one, which is our economy. People have less money to spend. They're having a hard time making ends meet. You saw the headlines yesterday from the new poll that's out that says, the top one concern that British Columbians have is not being able to afford their rent. Yeah. We are in bad times right now, and all three of those are controlled by our NDP government. All three of those could be helped by our NDP government. And, I heard the NDP government taking credit for not having bridge traffic this year because they had redone the traffic lights down Highway 97. And I actually laughed out loud thinking to myself, clearly somebody hasn't done their homework because the reason
tourism is down, that might be part of it. That might be part of the problem.
That's why we don't have enough bridge traffic. So, honestly, I would take bridge traffic right now because I am hearing loudly from my constituents that are restaurateurs, that are tour operators, that are the wineries, that literally they are not seeing the people this year. And what's really interesting is that we're also seeing it with the hotels that are down. And I think that's largely because when you do have a family that comes, let's say to have a family reunion, you might have your families, with 2 or 3, 4 kids that are staying in Airbnbs, but you might have the parents that are staying in a hotel, and the grandparents, I should say, staying in a hotel. So what they're experiencing is that there isn't that sort of synergy that happened between Airbnbs and hotels. It's just no longer there. And
there's some people that absolutely love staying in hotels, and then there's some people that once they experiment with Airbnbs, they like that, and it's kind of hit and miss. And I was definitely a very staunch hotel person kind of thing, staying in some of the nicer hotels. And then after I experienced some Airbnbs, I'm just like, this is because you get kind of a home right away from home, right? So
100%. Nice. And with the election coming, what BC United would focus on is delivering more supply. That's what we need. It wouldn't be an issue. And Stats Canada came out with a brilliant report on how the Airbnb legislation is actually affecting our rental rates and our rental stock. And they said it's having a negligible effect. Right. There's no bang for the buck was the headline that I read.
Studies in New York and said the same thing, right? Because this policy was enacted in the U.S. in some areas, and I think that's how they adopted, and they thought they could just swing the hammer here.
Totally.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask. You're not running again.
I'm not.
And do you want to share some of that, or are you ready to share?
I'll try to do it without crying. No, honestly, it was serving as the MLA has been the joy, one of the joys of my life. Nothing has brought me more satisfaction, more warmth than hearing the stories of constituents.
Because lots of people come to you, obviously, right? And they tell you.
Absolutely.
Including myself and our Bill C-18, and we all come and say, hey, these are the things that seem unfair.
Totally. And really being able to do things to work on files and casework. And I have to give a huge shout out to Jody Cleland, who's in my office and manages most of the casework, and Sonia Sandhu, who does a lot of the support on that work. The casework, the stories. I have sat at my boardroom table with tears streaming down my face listening to the stories more times than anyone. But then also being able to see and put that into policy. So, BC United's announcement on Tuesday about not having any income tax on 50,000 or below. Immediately, I had text messages from some of the seniors that I've been working with saying, this will change my life. Yeah. Now I don't have to choose between rent and
food.
That
was bold. That was very bold.
Oh,
that was very bold.
Absolutely. And it needs to be done. Yeah. We need to recognize that people are at the end of their rope. Yeah. There is nothing more. And we have to address affordability of life immediately.
And then what I found interesting about that, though, is right away the NDP reaction came out and said it was radical and extreme. Literally from the same party that bought the election last time with a $1,000 rent credit. Because I asked ChatGPT, I said, so they said this, what would you say? And they said it seems weird that they would say that, because they literally at the last election, they chucked out that $1,000 rent credit, right?
Totally. And the election before that, it was the tolls on the bridge, right?
So it's. I mean, I think I suggested last time, just like I said, the policy should be by the BC United would be just like whatever they're offering, we'll double it.
Yeah.
That way, maybe we stop the nonsense, right? But I do think saying no provincial tax for 50,000 other is a real game changer for a lot of people. Like you say, it's a game changer for, if the feds would match that, holy cow.
Oh, it would be amazing. And what it does is it really gives us that leg up for students or young professionals that are just starting out. It's a leg up for those that are starting in their trades. It's a leg up for those that are trying to live on minimum wage. It's a leg up for the seniors who are on fixed incomes. It literally is a game changer. And someone asked me just this morning, I got this text message and said, if you don't defend how you're going to pay for this, I don't believe you. And I said, well, there's $4.9 billion of unallocated funds sitting in the NDP budget. We don't even have to change the budget, and we don't have to change a single program, and it's sitting right there, ready for us to give that relief to every single British Columbian.
I think the big thing that people don't realize, if you're talking about people that are making less than $50,000, most of that money goes back into the system, and it has a multiplier effect. So that 50 turns into 500,000 or whatever that is. Yeah. If you give money to people that have a lot of money, it goes into a bank account, it doesn't do anything unless they invest it, right? So giving money to people that are going to spend it actually helps the economy, generates more taxation and all kinds of things, right?
Well, and just on that, in 2001, Gordon Campbell became premier, and his first order of business was to give a 25% personal tax credit across the board, or tax reduction across the board. Yeah. They had replenished the entire personal tax amount within 3 years' time. Yeah. It was back up to normal without having to increase the taxes.
It's that money 100%. Multiplier, right? And again, if you give money to people that are going to spend it, they're going to fuel the economy. Right?
100%.
And we saw that even with COVID, right? When they were giving away money, things took off, right? So it makes sense. And, it's obviously the platforms will get revealed from everybody as we move along, right? But basically they took a page out of the NDP playbook and beat them to it, really. And it's a bold one.
It is. It's a bold one, but it actually speaks to what BC United has been about, since we won in 2001. And that is, we're all about making sure that British Columbians can afford to live here, have hope for a future, know that they're going to have a job, know that they're going to have, a way to buy a house. And right now we're dealing with an affordability crisis, with the worst housing prices that we've ever seen in history, with the least amount of services, whether that's healthcare, mental health supports, et cetera, than we've ever seen. And there isn't a metric that they're thriving on. Our economy is actually sliding. And, we went from the top economy in Canada 7 years ago to absolutely the bottom of the barrel, save only PEI. PEI is worse than we are. We are a resource-rich province, and we should not be in that position right now. So, if we go back to me not being an MLA, you can still see my passion. You can still see that I want to change things for British Columbians. And I am so blessed and so fortunate that my private sector life with Troika is actually building homes and making sure that, every morning, every individual that works for Troika gets to get out of bed and try and do our part to solve the housing crisis. And that's what we're going to do. More homes built better, and just keep on that trajectory.
I have there's a story that popped up today, and it's a story that I've been playing with for a while. I made this suggestion a few times, but it popped up. A small town in Saskatchewan is offering $30,000 to people to move to small communities. And I'm going to make some references here. There's communities all over BC, small communities, Slocan, Greenwoods, all these small little towns that have lots of lots. Like I think even in Greenwood, there's probably 100 lots, service lots sitting there. How do we incentivize maybe people that are empty nesters to move into those locations and then free up homes here so that people that are working in the city and that can buy in those homes, and we can kind of spread out this kind of like everybody seems to want to condense to large metropolitan areas, right? But like those small communities, like if you drive through Slocan, I was there just recently, like there's a lot of boarded up stores, they have service. It's a service city, but they're losing their population.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to jobs. I think the difference is that Saskatchewan under Premier Moe has had a huge resurgence in its economy and a huge resurgence in the amount of labor needs that they have. And so they're incenting people to come to them and saying like, hey, not only will we give you 30,000, but we have jobs for you here.
I'm just saying retired people maybe could move.
Maybe.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and even, some people that can work remotely, I'm thinking about accountants and lawyers and stuff like that.
Yeah, digital nomads.
Yeah, so that they could go to the smaller communities, and maybe if we incentivize them to go there, I'll give you a plan. I got one.
Okay. I mean, the issue with our seniors and incentivizing our seniors is we'd really seriously have to rethink healthcare. Yeah. Right now, the rural and remote healthcare that the population receives is horrific, and we've seen the ER closures throughout our province. Those ER closures are now creeping into the Lower Mainland, so they're starting to experience the same pain with Peace Arch and with Mission.
There is talk with the Conservative government of Canada talking about a Blue Seal program that may help alleviate some of that, because Poilievre's government is saying there's a lot of people driving cabs or Ubers that are licensed doctors in different countries and stuff like that. So there's a way to get more healthcare workers too. Yeah. Obviously, if we're increasing the population, that's one of the things. We're increasing the population, not increasing the housing demand to meet that population growth. The same for healthcare and all those other things.
Absolutely, right? And I will say that Kevin Falcon has gone on record saying the BC United government would actually hire all of our foreign-trained Canadian doctors. We'd start there. We have Canadian doctors who've been trained in Ireland, who've been trained in the U.S., who've been trained in the UK, who've been trained in Australia, and they're waiting to come home. And right now, this NDP government says you can come home, but you have to start at the bottom and you have to do some testing, and you have to and we're all for testing, but once they're tested, hey, let's bring them in. Let's get them, credentialed and let's make sure that they're part of the working population. That's not happening right now, and it's not being expedited in any way, shape, or form. But hold on, because there are more announcements in terms of what more BC United would do in terms of training and the frontline workers that we so desperately need.
Lots of stuff to fix, that's for sure, right?
Absolutely. And it's killing me that I won't be a part of it.
You and I have not always agreed on everything.
No.
But I can say one thing. When I went down to Victoria, you reached out and invited me to visit the legislature as a guest of you. And if one thing, you've always been very respectful of KelownaNow and everything that we do. So, I thank you for your service. And
I'm like, I thought you were shaking my head. I'm sorry.
I was more pointing to you, but it's a big job to serve a community, right? And it's lots of times a thankless job. And I know during the tougher times during COVID, every time you stood up to speak, sometimes people attacked you in different things, and it's sometimes a thankless job too. But KelownaNow thanks you.
Oh, thank you. That does mean a lot to me. And honestly, I have read many of my emails with tears in my eyes, with people reaching out in gratitude. Just seeing that I worked hard, and I'm going to leave everything on the mat and make sure that British Columbians are really well represented in this. This
is a great province, right?
Amazing. We have the best province.
Just look out the window.
I know. It's gorgeous. Look behind us.
There you go. Yeah. And anything else for today?
No, thank you so much for having me. And we need to right the ship, because right now our tourism industry is hurting.
And thank you for watching KelownaNow.